Professional wrestling is very similar to the movies and shows that come from Hollywood. Wrestling has heroes and villains, drama and action, and everything in between. Wrestling is breaking into the mainstream. Wrestling superstars John Cena, Dave Bautista, and The Rock are some of the most successful movie stars in the world. There have been several good shows like Heels, The Queen of Villains, and Young Rock that are about wrestling. And finally, the film The Iron Claw was a box office success and loved by fans and critics alike. That movie looked at the tragic story of the Von Erich family that battled foes in the squared circle and battled personal demons outside of the ring. Now, a lot of wrestling fans are hoping for more feature films about other wrestlers. So with this episode of Two Views Wrestling, we want to look at 5 wrestlers we think could make great movies. Before we start the list, remember to hit a moonsault on that like button and lock a Texas cloverleaf on the subscribe button. Now let's start the list. Number 5, Harley Race. The story of Harley Race is a story of a man who went through tragedy after tragedy in his life and would go on to become one of the biggest and well-respected stars of the sport of wrestling. As a kid, he battled through polio, and right as he was breaking into the wrestling business, he was in a tragic car accident where he almost lost his leg, and sadly, his pregnant wife would pass away. He would overcome this and become arguably the greatest champion in the history of the National Wrestling Alliance, holding the world title 7 times. Then, right as he joined the powerhouse WWE and was probably making great money, he suffered an injury in a match against Hulk Hogan that sidelined him for a long period of time. Finally, in the 90s, when he was a great manager in WCW, he would get in another car accident that would be the final nail in the coffin of his career. Another thing from his career that could make for some great scenes in a movie was when he first got into the business, he was the chauffeur and handler for the 800-pound wrestler Happy Humphrey. Talk about paying your dues. Number 4, Rowdy Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper is one of the most famous stars of the 80s and 90s, right up there with Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and Randy Savage. But his journey to get there wasn't easy. Roddy came from a broken home and would become a runaway at a very young age. Living on the streets in his early teens had to have been very hard. Roddy would enter the wrestling business at just 15 years old. The wrestling business is a hard business to get into for anyone, let alone a 15-year-old kid. The business was full of outlaws, guys that were out to be the big stars and make the most money. They didn't care who they stepped over to get there. So Roddy took a lot of shit on his way up, but he not only survived, he thrived. Not only did he succeed in wrestling, but he became a mainstream star as well. He starred in cult classic films They Live and Hell Comes to Frogtown. He also guest starred on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Roddy's story is a testament that when life gets hard, don't give up and just keep going. Also, if given the chance to kick a pop star in the head, do it. You might become the biggest villain in the world and make some big money. Number 3, Andre the Giant. Hollywood loves larger-than-life movies, and Andre the Giant was larger than life. Hard not to be larger than life when your nickname is the 8th wonder of the world. Andre was afflicted with giantism, which kept his body growing. Because of that, he wasn't going to have a long life, so he decided to enjoy his life by doing all the things he loved. One of the things Andre loved was drinking booze, and he is probably the most legendary booze hound in history. There are multiple stories of him drinking over 100 beers in one sitting and still wouldn't be drunk. Andre was also an exceptional professional wrestler. At one time, he held the record for being the highest paid wrestler. In the 70s and early 80s, he was easily the biggest star in the world. Anytime a territory had a big show coming up and needed a sellout, you would bring in the giant. He also transcended wrestling and crossed into Hollywood. He starred on The $6 Million Man and he worked on Conan. He also had a starring role in The Princess Bride, which has become an iconic film. Andre also had a sad life. He could never blend into a crowd. Because of his size, it was hard to enjoy everyday life and be able to just relax. A movie about Andre the Giant would be about a guy who wasn't here for a long time, but he damn sure was here for a good time. Number 2, Kurt Angle. A movie about Kurt Angle would show that not all wrestling stories are sad. This would be a movie featuring a lot of ups and downs. Angle lost his father as a teenager in a terrible accident. He would dedicate his wrestling career to the memory of his father. One of his wrestling coaches would be murdered, which was chronicled in the film Foxcatcher. Angle would go on to win an Olympic gold medal with a broken freaking neck, I might add. From there, Kurt would enter the world of professional wrestling where he was something of a phenom. Not only did he take to the in-ring work like a duck to water, but he had no problem nailing the character work as well. He would rise through the ranks and quickly become a world champion. Unfortunately, Kurt would re-break his neck several times in his pro career. This would lead him to developing an addiction to painkillers. He would spiral out of control and got into some legal troubles as well. Just as things looked the worst, Angle would persevere and overcome his demons. Angle's story has patriotism, athletics, tragedy, addiction, and finally, survival. Number 1, Bret Hart. The Iron Claw was a movie that looked at the tragic tale of the Von Erich wrestling family. The Hart family is another famous wrestling family that story is filled with success and tragedy. Stu and Helen Hart would have 12 children, and almost all of them would be involved in the wrestling business. If they weren't directly involved, their spouses or children would be involved. Bret Hart would become the biggest star of the family. He would go down as one of the greatest wrestlers ever in the business. Bret would see his own troubles in the business. We all know the story of the Montreal Screwjob and him suffering a career-ending injury. But the story of the Hart family is a lot more tragic. Davey Boy Smith and Jim Neidhart both married into the family and became big stars in the business, and both guys battled drug addiction, and both would die way too young. The worst thing to happen to this family is the horrible accident that claimed the life of Owen Hart, one of the worst deaths in pro wrestling. A lot like how the Iron Claw ended with Kevin Von Erich being the only one left, this movie ends with Bret Hart sitting alone.
All right, so you mentioned wrestling breaking out into the mainstream, and you listed The Rock, Bautista, John Cena. I was I was caught off guard because you didn't mention the ultimate A-lister, The Miz.
He broke into Hollywood?
Yeah, he is Hollywood.
Oh, we're counting the 7 direct-to-DVD Marine films he was in?
Yeah, those are classics. Very highly rated on Rotten Tomatoes. Or you didn't mention MJF and his Oscar-worthy performance in The Iron Claw.
He got cut, correct?
The first one that jumped out to me really was Harley Race. I'm not too familiar with Harley Race. Everything you said describes a movie that the general public that doesn't even fuck with wrestling would want to watch. And I just thought it would be a perfect miniseries, really. But then you would end with the Hogan injury, and then his first day being a manager, and he's like, I would assume he's probably like kind of pissed off, like fuck, I used to being a wrestler, and then like nervous, and then you could end it with, oh, Harley Race had a legendary second career as a manager.
Yeah,
Andre the Giant, I feel like people would think would be cool. Kurt Angle, that would be sick to me. You have the Olympic aspect you can put in there, but also I would just like to see on the screen going from I assume it's pretty professional atmosphere of the Olympics, and then his first taste of the carny business of wrestling is that ECW debacle kind of,
yeah,
because everything I read online said he was not a fan of what was going on when he showed up there, and it's like that thing of like, oh, he's a fish out of water, how is he going to adapt? But like you said, he ends up
yeah.
nailing it. Bret Hart, I'm a huge Bret Hart fan, so I would love to see that movie. Some of the names that I thought of was Shawn Michaels, and I know you love Shawn, so I was
Yeah,
surprised that he wasn't on there. I just think the whole idea of making amends would be interesting to see on the screen. A name that I think a lot of people would talk about, I'm not personally interested, is Ric Flair. Do you have any interest in a Ric Flair movie?
I also personally would not care for a Ric Flair movie. I could see why people would. I mean, there is a story there, there's tragedy there, and everything like that. I'm not a fan of Ric Flair, so
The other one that I was blown away that you did not have on the list, since you're a Hulkamaniac, was Hulk Hogan. Because I was super hyped for the Todd Phillips Hemsworth movie. Disappointed that it's not going to happen. I want to see it. Once you link Hemsworth to Hogan to me, I'm like, okay, well, it has to be done now because I feel like
yeah,
Hemsworth can pull it off.
yeah,
I was surprised seeing
yeah.
that you didn't put that on there.
Yeah, after seeing The Joker 2, uh, I wouldn't want Todd Phillips in charge of Hulk Hogan's biopic. Uh, Chris Hemsworth, his arms will never be big enough to be Hulk Hogan. Just for me, like you said, I'm a huge Hulkamaniac. I feel like that's a story that they couldn't do justice to, if that makes any sense. Like, it just would be hard to get over the impact that Hulk Hogan had, the what he was to the wrestling business, and it would take me out of it. Like Zach Efron as Kevin Von Erich, I'm fine with that. Like there's to me, there's no one in Hollywood that could play Hulk Hogan. Like he was larger than life, and I don't know if there's a larger than life actor that could do that.
A question that I was thinking of: what, based on the success of the Iron Claw, who is going to be the next wrestler that gets a movie? After you win the details about Harley Race, I feel like, and then the success of Iron Claw, I feel like that is where an A24 will go next, is Harley Race. Which wrestler do you see mainstream Hollywood producing a movie on?
Well, to be honest, I feel like maybe Terry Funk would be a cool one, and maybe Eddie Guerrero. I think those might be the two easier ones to do. They're not really big, like huge wrestlers like an Andre or like a Hogan would be. I would love a Harley Race one, but there's a lot of wrestlers that I think their story would be better as a like mini series. Like the Harley Race would be good. I don't know, the Hart family thing could be good as like a mini series. So that wrestling's like full of there's countless stories I think that could transition to the big screen or as a mini series or a TV show.
So in the comments, let us know some wrestlers that you would like to see a movie biopic on, and which wrestler do you think we will be getting the next movie on?